Starting a new series today, and it'll kind of make sense to you, maybe following on from last week, because last week we were talking about the incarnation, closing down that series with the incarnation being a manifestation, a demonstration, an exhibition. There's a lot of different words you can use for the glory of God. So I'm going to start a new series just simply called The Glory of God. It's not totally connected to last week, but you'll see some of the similarities. We're specifically looking at the glory of the Lord. So the first thing I want to say, though, is when we use that phrase, the glory of the Lord, the question is, well, what is it? And it's an abstract kind of thing. It's difficult to put into terms and words. And I guess probably that's part of the incarnation. You know, this glory thing is tricky. So let me just show up, the glory of God, and then we'll get a good picture, Jesus. That's the glory of God right there. And that's got to be the essence when John says that the Word became flesh, the glory of God, the Word became flesh, and lived among us, dwelt among us. We beheld His glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. The way we ended the incarnation series last week was saying that the incarnation was instrumental and necessary in revealing His glory in the Son of God and as the Son of Man. John starts his gospel with that. And we ended the series with that scene with Moses in Exodus 33 when he says, "Show me your glory." He's talking to God. And as a result, we see that God passes by him and says, "You can see my back, but not my face." And then Paul talks about Jesus Christ as being the face of the glory. In fact, let's read those two scriptures. 2 Corinthians 3, verses 17 and 18.
Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's liberty. But we all, with unveiled face, beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory, just as from the Lord, the Spirit.
And then in the following chapter, verse 6.
For God, who said, "Light shall shine out of darkness," is the one who is shown in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Christ.
So we were talking, that's the way we kind of ended last week, was with that imagery, if you would. So that was all at the end, and it kind of does sort of segue. But the question is, so what is it? If somebody gets to Exodus 33, read verse 19.
And he said, "I will make all my goodness pass before you, and I will proclaim the name of the Lord before you, and will be gracious to who I will be gracious, and who I show mercy, on who I will show mercy."
So Moses asked for all his glory, and the Lord's response is, "All my goodness and my name shall pass before you." That's important to hold on to. And then in the next chapter, it actually happens, verses 5, 6, and 7.
The Lord descended in the cloud and stood there with him, as he called upon the name of the Lord. Then the Lord passed by in front of him and proclaimed, the Lord God, compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in loving kindness and truth, who keeps loving kindness for thousands, who forgives iniquity, transgression, and sin. Yet he will by no means leave the guilty unpunished, visiting the iniquity of fathers on the children and on the grandchildren, to the third and fourth generations. Moses made haste to bow low toward the earth and worship.
So again, we're reading these things, but it is abstract. It's very, if you go to different, commentaries or scholars or whatever, you get them saying stuff like this about the glory of the Lord. Manifestations of His divine perfections. Splendor, brightness, majesty. And it becomes clear right away that all these words are kind of like, these are really big. And they're having a really hard time. I mean, if you say, what is a hand? Well, it's something, you could define things. This is very hard to define the glory of the Lord. The actual Hebrew word is kabod, and it literally means weight. Like you're talking, saying, wow, that's really heavy. We're expressing, well, it's not really a weight that it's heavy, but the presence just all of a sudden of whatever you just said, man, that's heavy. Which would be a different way of saying, that's the glory associated with that, the weight of it. If you see what I'm saying, it's heavy. And it's really not a weight, it's not a glory that none of us want to be involved with in that respect. It means weight, but with the glory of the Lord, it's weight in a good sense. It's His splendor. There's abundance that we're going to see today. Riches, dignity, Very, very wonderful, wonderful words. A real big word, though, is honor. Now we know in the Ten Commandments we get to honor your mother and your father kind of thing. And we tend to look at that word honor as doing stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that. What we do does show what we honor. But the real essence behind honor is what's valuable. So the injunction to the kids is to really see your parents as valuable, absolutely precious, and therefore act accordingly. That's what's really behind it. And the whole idea of honoring God is saying, you know what? He's invaluable. To even try to put any kind of value on him. He's precious. I can't think of enough words. That's the honor I have for him. I count him as precious and valuable and whatever. So what I want you to kind of hold on to as we move into where we're moving into is God said, all my goodness is going to pass before you in response to Moses' request to see the glory, all my goodness. And the very word itself for the glory of the Lord. The strongest word, they're all words that apply, but this word honor is what's important. What do we really count as precious in our lives? Because the thing that we count precious in our lives is what we kind of give glory to and say that that's glorious, and that's what we honor, and that's the way we act. Anyway, you guys know that I'm really into the law of the firsts, always looking to see when is the first time that this is mentioned in the Bible, in the Old or in the New. So that's where we're going to be today, is in the book of Exodus, because in the book of Exodus, that's the first time the glory of the Lord is mentioned. It's kind of funny, because creation, as Paul says in Romans 1 and Psalm 8, Psalm 19, there's different places that refer to creation as being a representation of the glory of the Lord. But in the book of Genesis itself, it never says that. It's only afterwards, which makes it kind of interesting. I'd like to go to scriptures in creation and start there, but there's none there. The glory of the Lord is first mentioned in Exodus 16. So if you want to go there, Russ, would you read from Exodus 16, the first 5 verses?
Then they set out from Elim, and all the congregation of the sons of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after their departure from the land of Egypt. And the whole congregation of the sons of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the sons of Israel said to them, would that we had died by the Lord's hand in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the pots of meat, when we ate bread to the full. For you brought us out into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. Then the Lord said to Moses, behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people should go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them, whether or not they will walk in my instruction. And it will come about on the 6th day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather daily.
The test. It's nice to know what a test is. I mean, if you have to show up, I'm going to take a test tomorrow. What's the subject? Not telling, wait till you get there. But this one is not like that. He tells us what the test is. We don't really have to guess. And it has a lot of different ways of looking at it. I think it has a lot of different ways of us looking at it today, quite frankly, not just these guys out in the wilderness back in Exodus 16. Part of the test is, will they obey me? In other words, will they do what I said, gather it daily, and he gives them a quota, or will they gather more? But that's part of the question there. And part of that has to do with, will they trust me for daily provision? Because it's very clear, it's going to happen on a daily basis. So you need to live today and trust God for tomorrow. Will they trust me for daily provision? That should sound familiar to us. Give us this day our daily bread. And how many people wouldn't jump out of buildings when their 401k bellies up if they were living today and trusting God for tomorrow? There's a lot being said when he says there's a test going on here. Will they do what I said? Will they trust me? You can read a little bit more into it. I do anyway. I'm not saying this was all of it, but will they be content? I mean, anybody here eaten the same thing for the last 40 years? Well, some of you aren't 40 years old. But the answer is no. Some of us, if we ate the same thing for 3 days in a row, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, would be going nuts. We would not be very content. Say, I'd like to have anything other than this. Again, and that's part of it. Will they be content? Manna again? Another day? Will they be content with what they've got? And that's a powerful question for America. Will they remain grateful when there's no effort at all putting into produce what they have to produce, when it's being given to them all the time? Will they remain grateful, or will they become complacent? There's all kinds of ways I think of looking at this. God makes it clear that the test is about, will they listen to me? And I want to say this. They didn't have a Bible at that point, and even if they had, I don't believe that's our injunction. Will they read their Bible every day and memorize Scripture? Will they listen to me? That means you have to hear a voice. That means that you have to be close. It means there has to be a relationship involved, not through a book, but in the spirit of relationship. It says, will they take the time? I mean, I talk to people who say, well, yeah, I do my devotionals in the morning, 5 minutes. And I not that time is everything, don't get me wrong, but I think in terms of, and then you spend the next 18 hours, like, what? I'm not trying to be a wise guy. I'm just saying that all along, God has wanted the kind of relationship where we know His voice and we're listening. And as He leads us, we follow. If He says do this, we do it. If He doesn't say to do something, and I go through this all, people think I get a telegram in the morning from God, and I go through it. No, it's not like that at all. But if I'm not getting a direction, I actually live my life. You just get on with it. Because it's called life, and it's a beautiful thing, and He wants us to enjoy it. But He always wants us to always position ourselves in a way that if He says, Mary, we can actually hear Him and go, ooh, yes, Lord. You see all those spots in the Bible where God calls, like, here I am, whoever, here I am, Lord, send Him. It's kind of like that.